have the District of Muskoka, and you have Severn Sound Environmental Association with existing programs that will continue to exist. And that's a benefit, but it also challenges this RFP approach in terms of how do you best fit into their program. The ecological benchmarks one. For inland lakes and nutrients, this is a relatively easy one. There are set standards. The District of Muskoka has them. They're pretty clearly laid out, and you could pretty much adopt those. When it comes to Georgian Bay waters, setting clear benchmarks or stages at which you would then result in further study is challenging because of the high degree of variability that exists in Georgian Bay waters. And so getting a consultant to come to you with, here are the benchmarks that are then going to result in action, I believe is going to be a challenge for some of your parameters. And that's a repeat, the benchmarks are unclear. And then to a degree, and I think we can get past this a little bit, but the standards, those standards of analysis are a little bit contested. I'll use bacteria monitoring as perhaps an example where there have been standards that have been set for bacteria monitoring in the past that don't align cleanly with provincial or federal standards. And you will have some people who will still rely on those old standards and will pull those out and try to hold this program to account, where then you have set provincial or federal standards that may not. And so finding a process whereby you can both council and staff and presumably the public that you're trying to help with this, that's a contested area that I'm not sure that you're going to have resolved through your RFP.
Greg?
Yes, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. You said interrupt you.
Perfect.
So on slide 6, just to go back.
I'll try my best.
You can go backwards. I just wanted to sort of maybe identify a few things. You're talking about the District of Muskoka and the SSEA. And one of the things that we've been talking about, and I'm sure you may have heard it, but is making sure that we're getting far better ROI, not just a more consistent approach to our testing and our management of waters, but a better ROI from the district, for example. And so working with whoever is going to be doing this, we need to make sure that the district is giving us as much attention as they are giving all the other municipalities within the district. And so that's up to our district councilors and us to demonstrate that, you know, there's a lot of inland lakes, for example, and why isn't the district doing more of that work? Would be my comment. And as far as SSEA is concerned, there's some of the work they're doing is wonderful, but it's, you know, more germane in many cases to what I would call Southern Georgian Bay, and we need to think about what's going on there. So I just, as part of the RFP, I keep going to the return on investment concept from any supplier, and I consider all of these suppliers. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I guess the other thing I wanted to sort of mention is that, you know, there, as far as Georgian Bay is concerned, a very similar area where you hail from, the TOA, Township of the Archipelago, is in many ways similar, but in other ways not so similar. And that is mainly because Southern Georgian Bay is much more intensely developed around the shores of the very southern part of it, for sure. But even as you move up into the more northerly regions of the Township of Georgian Bay, that's where we might be more like the archipelago, not nearly as intense, the development isn't as intense. So I wanted to draw that to your attention. And the other thing is that I realize that there are some transient vessels coming out of places like Parry Sound, but nothing like what we deal with in our township coming out of Midland and Penetang and Honey Harbor. As an example, there's somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 slips in Honey Harbor, or sorry, in Midland Penetang, and most of them, 90% of them, are transient boaters who come out into our municipality, and we need to be mindful of that. So just a few things for you to think about. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are actually both very, I think, can be quite illustrative of what I'm trying to communicate to council. With respect to a management framework that places your water quality monitoring firmly within what the township can do about it if you get the results. And so for other municipalities that I've done similar work for, it's a conscious decision in terms of saying, all right, we have concern about shoreline development, so we're going to monitor these parameters because that's under our control, or we have influence. Maybe it's not under your control, but you have influence over how development happens. And so there's certain, if nutrients happen or certain benchmarks are passed, you can then implement either planning approaches, education approaches, site planning. There's different tools that you might have that you can put into place to improve the water quality if it degrades that far. Then you get into a range of water quality parameters, and this is typically more true of Georgian Bay, where you have different government jurisdictions and legal control, and sometimes you don't have any legal control over what might be polluting your water. So the water quality monitoring can then be good to know to inform other levels of government, but you may yourselves have limited ability to actually enact any kind of management control over that. And transient boaters would be an example of that, which is that you might want to engage in water quality monitoring. That's your choice, but your ability to do anything about it becomes restricted, perhaps to political recourse, trying to leverage that. And that becomes a decision from a management framework. Is that the kind of monitoring that you want to be doing? It's not for me to answer. It's for me to help pose that question.
Well, sorry, just to finish off on that, there are a lot of things that we can't do, but I can point out that one of the things that happens with transient boaters is that there are now a number of locations, especially in Honey Harbor and somewhat north, where there are yachting, I'll call them outstations, and basically where docks have been built and they're turning them into residential uses, basically, and that's something we can do something about, or we're hopefully going to be able to do something about it. So I draw that to your attention as well. Thank you.
For sure, and again, it's sort of being able to be clear when you're doing your monitoring program that you have specific actions that you think you can do, and other times there may be, and it may be completely with merit to be monitoring things where you have limited actions that you can take, but that you want to do it because you want to forward it to the provincial or federal agency and try to leverage their policy structures into play. As an example, and this actually you can't read it really clearly, and I can tell because I can't read it really clearly. But this actually is a flow chart, if you will, for what the district has in place for its lake monitoring program. So to give you an example of being able to follow through this flow, is it outlines, here's the monitoring data that you're going to have. Here are the steps after, say, 3 years. If these parameters are above, then it results in this, and then it results in this. And there's a flow chart for how to then direct staff and direct further research or study for those inland lakes. So that's an example of a clear management framework that the monitoring program is designed to respond to. I'm going to go on because you can't read it, but it gives you a level of detail. From the work that we've done so far, and this is, I wanted to have some discussion with you about this, is that some preliminary recommendations or thoughts rather that we're having would be with respect to your inland lakes, is that you turn to the District of Muskoka, as has already been indicated, and you look at how you build on that program, support, and perhaps enhance to represent your interests better within the existing District of Muskoka's program. Part of the reason that I would suggest this is that it's sort of working with those groups that have the expertise in play. And in addition to a clear policy framework for their approach, they also are supported by a water web that has excellent both research and education materials for the inland lake waters that speak directly to that. You can survey it, you can assess it in terms of how you might want to enhance it for any of your specific inland lake issues, but you're building on that existing and current framework rather than trying to rebuild it for yourself. So it's just a thought that I wanted to put out there. The recommendation that I would have is that if you're looking to consolidate anything, it would be to once a year have a presentation or a consolidated, this is what the township's water program looks like. Here's what the district has done, and it's tabulated for you so that it's very clear for you as a local lower tier municipality what's been done by the district. My understanding would be that you might be able to approach them to look at how they would enhance further their water quality program to support your interests. So that's one. With respect to Georgian Bay, we can continue the path that we're moving down around trying to get this RFP for water quality monitoring to encapsulate everything that's in there. My concern is that it's a very large ask for any consultant that's going to bid on it, and you may not end up with the result at the end of the day that you want because of how large that ask is. You might want to consider instead is looking at what does that management framework look like? Who are the different groups that we would want to play with, and how do we achieve some broader objectives of consolidation and clarity for the township with respect to the township or with respect to Georgian Bay waters? Because there are so many jurisdictions that are working on that, and there's so many levers for that. Plus, there are so many different groups. So there's Severn Sound Environmental Association, Georgian Bay Forever, the Georgian Bay Great Lakes Foundation, just to name those three down in this area as not-for-profits. And then you've got MECP, Upper Great Lakes Management Unit, and Environment Climate Change Canada, at least all of those doing water quality. Beyond that, there's historic data that's been gathered for North and South Bay in the last 7 years that can be brought to that table to inform that discussion about what those benchmarks are. And then to go back to the differentiation between study and research, when it comes to things like climate change and some of the issues around algae that are and cyanobacteria that are potentially driven by climate change, that's likely something that's better looked at from a research and study lens than it is through a monitoring program lens. And getting that clarity for council, I think is a better approach to what it is that you're doing. It'll also help to get that clarity around benchmarks and analysis standards that is currently relatively contested. And then with respect to your hotspot monitoring, the last one was just I think we could possibly do this through the RFP, but establish a risk assessment approach where we're looking at the township in terms of what we consider to be high risk areas that we would enhance monitoring and do your hotspot monitoring in, and then begin to leverage that into a management framework. So
I'm just going to interrupt you if I can.
Yeah,
Thank you.
by all means.
On the inland lakes suggestion, unfortunately, I see this as a step backwards, not a step forwards.
Yep.
With regards to water quality testing. We've already seen how the DMM handles our garbage management, as well as other programs within our township, and my constituents would want to see a drastic step forward in water quality testing rather than reverting back to what was already there to begin with and comes every other year at best. I believe they test randomly different lakes on an infrequent basis. And so that to my, if I can, I just would not be able to support that. Thank you.
Good to know. May I ask a question of you? For the two folks that are the two groups that have been doing water quality monitoring within the inland lakes, they were sort of leaning in that same direction. But what I'm lacking from the background data for the inland lakes areas are what are the concerns that are emerging that you're looking for water quality monitoring, and perhaps like I'm happy to have a separate conversation if council permits about that, but that's what I have no background work to say here are the concerns of the inland lakes that that either warrant study and or water quality monitoring.
I'm happy to take that offline with you and provide you with a list of detailed issues that we have. But again, I just don't foresee my constituents being at all happy with reverting back to the DMM.
Thanks.
Greg, could I just make a comment?
It's your meeting.
Greg? Are
Go
you
ahead.
there? Oh, thank you. This is informal, I thought, Mr. Mayor, so I wasn't going through you, but apologize if I was supposed to. But in any event, I don't think we want to. The District of Muskoka has not done a particularly thorough job in terms of water testing, in the sense that they have been testing every other year, and it's a random sort of lake sampling. In fact, in the last year or two, I don't think they did any testing in the township of Georgian Bay. Well, that's not good enough, and I think that's what Councillor Graziano was talking about. What I'm sort of thinking here is that through our district councillors and our mayor, that we do some pretty serious arm twisting and maybe even in an arm lock to get some better performance from the district program, and even from the watershed council. We need more attention as well. So I think that we may be able to get some very good response, but we have to turn up the heat, so to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Krutsier. If I may, in regards to the district inland lake testing, when the district found out that we were issuing an RFP for water quality monitoring, actually they reached out to us and they said, hey, you know, if there's any extra testing that you might need to have done, let us know, because we haven't really reached out to the district to say we're not happy with what you're doing. We want you to be doing this, that, or the other. It's been kind of status quo. However, very recently, the district has said if there is any additional testing that you'd like us to do, and to kind of create some synergies for you know, for Georgian Bay town testing, they're more than willing to look at it. And not only that, but it's also part of their remit in terms of costs. So they you know, they've suggested that they will probably absorb these types of costs, because it is part of their you know, their responsibility also. So before you know, taking a firm stance in terms of whether the district is able to do this for us or not, I would suggest for us to have more dialogue with the district and share with the district the kind of testing, you know, frequencies and types of testing through this RFP process, and if they're up to the challenge and are available to deliver a good submission, then I would keep my options open there.
You have more before we?
Nope.
Okay, so I won't call it a free for all, but councillors, we'll start with Councillor Hazelton. You might have an opinion.
Perhaps. Thank you, Greg. I just lost the last slide there, but okay, so you're suggesting for Georgian Bay a community workshop, and I fully endorse and support that, because I think there's a lot of value in discussion-oriented exercise. You've already had some interactions with a couple of us, but there's a lot of value, I think, and a lot of potential good outcome that could come from that. So I don't need to belabor the point. If that's something we can work towards scheduling, then I would say that's a great outcome from this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. This time I decided to put my hand up. In regards to CAO Mariotti's recommendation, I'm fine with considering the DMM and what they would offer. I'm just going based on what I already know of them with every periodic testing and in it being infrequent. So with regards to that, I'd be open to considering, suffice it that they would be able to provide the same level of service as our RFP is outlining. The only other comment that I'd like to make is with regards to challenges, and I think that given that this is going to be a volunteer-based program, the recruitment of volunteers could be somewhat of an issue. I myself was a volunteer this past year, and I also had worked with other volunteers within my ward, and I know that there were some strong concerns based on their experiences, which I'm happy to also take offline with you. But I do feel that on an ongoing basis, there could be challenges specifically around recruitment of volunteers. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. If I may, with respect to the volunteers, I would probably echo many of the same concerns that I suspect you would share with me, that I think there are opportunities and benefits of engaging volunteers in certain ways for certain parameters, but I would not rely wholly on volunteers for all of your water quality monitoring needs. Often engaging volunteers is a means of increasing overall community engagement in the value of our environment that has at times somewhat limited scientific value. So it's balancing those two components as any part of a program. So it's certainly the RFP will not be leading into an entirely I would not recommend that the RFP go towards an entire volunteer-based program.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. So I would agree with the comments we've made on the District of Muskoka and their potential involvement. I am surprised that they are offering involvement, that they didn't know that we wanted this done, but what I would want to see, I mean, as part of an involvement of the Muskoka District of Muskoka or whoever is doing inland lakes, is that we do engage and have the same ownership of data and other considerations you had on the earlier slide, so that we can overcome the current problems we have where we're looking at paper reports that have been provided to us in a PDF format, and you can't really easily compare numbers and locations. If we want to do some predictive data analysis, it would be important for us to have everything in a similar format, both inland lakes and sort of Georgian Bay. So I would, if the District of Muskoka is flexible on how they present and provide data to us, that would be great. On the Georgian Bay side, I know the experience and history for our Ward 2 and 4 councillors. I would definitely be listening for their input and suggestions on how we manage that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Councillor Bocek.
Thank you. And I don't know if we can remove this slide from the screen here, so I have the ability to see people, but there we go. I find this conversation very fascinating. And after reading the agenda, I thought to myself, you know, I just heard Councillor Hazelton say that, you know, he had spoken and a few council members had spoken to this group about the RFP. And I'm a board member of SSEA. I'm a board member of the Muskoka Watershed Council. I'm a district councillor, and I'm a Township of Georgian Bay councillor. And no one asked for my opinion. And I just feel that if this is going to be a council decision, it should have council input before a report is driven to the council level. It's just my thoughts, and just wanted to know maybe our CAO could give me a little bit of background on how this came to be and how it came to us today.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor Kutsia. I think this process was generated by council to start this RFP process, and there was discussion had at council that this was the one of the first spots where at a committee of the whole of council has the opportunity to provide input. So I don't know if that answers your question, Councillor Bocek.
Well, it certainly does help, but obviously there was input given by council members directly to this topic through the RFP process, and I'm just wondering why perhaps certain councillors were asked for their opinion, or did they reach out and offer their opinion? I understand that COW is the perfect place to do this, but when a report comes to COW that has already had certain councillors interject their thoughts into it and not others, I find that problematic.
I can't control the will of individual councillors.
Understood. I just, looking at this, reading the report and then hearing it here today and thinking, I have quite a bit of involvement with different, boards and watershed councils that maybe I should have been advised that this was going ahead and, gain some information from SSEA. Today, we're going through our strategic plan, and certainly would be nice to have somebody represent SSEA in this format. But regardless, we're at COW. We're all here to listen and learn, and I don't think there's any decisions being made here today. So as we move forward, certainly my involvement will be increased.
If I may, Councillor Bocek, I can assure you that leading into the preparation of this draft and the considerations that I presented to you, that those have come from those folks that are actively engaging in your water quality, your various water quality monitoring programs that are done throughout the township. And that included a conversation with SSEA, with the Georgian Bay Great Lakes Foundation, and others. So I've specifically not spoken to any councillor about this at this time in advance of this. And if the committee of the whole or council, I'm actually not sure which one's going to give me direction on this one, chooses to go to the path of a workshop, that my recommendation would be strongly that the various groups, as well as, well, my recommendation would be that I come to staff with a process in mind for how to engage in those workshops and what that would look like, including ensuring that the different groups are well represented.
Well, thank you for that. I think maybe I was misheard. I believe I heard Councillor Hazelton say that he had spoken previous, and other councillors may have too. So maybe Councillor Hazelton was mistaken.
I'd like to make a couple of comments, if I may. I think we all have to recognize a couple of things, and one of the reasons why we're trying to go through this RFP, and I know I'm in one sense repeating what you've already said, Greg, but we had a myriad of testing done, monitoring, whatever you want to call it, and even hotspotting for that matter. But it wasn't part of an overall framework. But I think more seriously, in my opinion, was the frustration that we were receiving information but not doing anything with it. And I think it's interesting, you talked about, what we can manage or how we can possibly respond to the information we're getting. And it's tough for us at this township to control the climate change we're going through. It's tough for us to control the weather, and therefore whatever runoffs may or may not happen at any particular time of the summer from the rock and woods around us. The one thing we can control to some degree is how much of that septic soup gets into our lakes. And we know, for instance, that our building department has a monitoring program, but we haven't always directed them to say, well, let's test out this bay, because this bay is, I know they did a bit of that last year, where they went to what they thought were some of the hot spots. But to me, that it's that kind of thing where I think we have to be a little more purposeful. in that I'm hoping that we'll discover that, we may make the decision that Bay X is is the one where we get, let me pick an example. Stuart Lake. We know Stuart Lake gets blue-green algae blooms every year, but we're not quite sure where they come from what I'm told. Like, do we know what's actually causing them? Is it the sewage plant up there? Is it septic beds? Is it a bunch of wintering deer? Like, and I think that's what's very important for us to determine is A, where it's coming from, and B, what, if anything, we can do about it. I mean, do we have to create booms around a particular spot because that's where it's always coming from and this limited breadth? I mean, I don't know. But to me, until we get from whoever is doing the monitoring or the hot spotting or the this or the that, the direction of saying, you better inspect every darn septic bed around Bay X because it's one of the worst spots we have. And based on DNA sampling or whatever, we know it's human. Then, to me, that's where I want to see this go. I don't want to say I don't care who does it, but to me, it's without the program giving us direction. It's, I hate to put it this way, but it's nice to know, even if we don't like even if it's not nice what we know, if we're not doing anything about it, it's almost, why are we bothering? And I think that, to me, for this RFP has to be, in my mind, the primary consideration. Will the testing lead us to action?
I'm debating about. I'm thinking of like many university lectures that come to mind. So I absolutely understand the desire and need for clear action from data. I think one of the challenges of any water quality program and any water quality monitoring program is that your ecosystem does not respond as quickly as you might hope or want. And or as cleanly as you might hope or want. And it certainly doesn't do so within 1, 2, and sometimes even 3 or 4 terms of council. So while you might be impatient as a council to see specific actions take place and be able to act on those immediately, sometimes the ecological parameters take 5 to 10 years to carry out. And so there is a need for that long-term lens, and it may be wholly appropriate to monitor every 2 years for certain parameters, and it doesn't look like you're doing enough or doing anything. And so then I think for Township, something to consider would be, what is your monitoring program versus what is your water quality program? And that's about education, that's about outreach, that's about understanding the ecosystems that you have and how they change. And water quality monitoring becomes a component of an overarching water quality program. Not to splice those words too much, but there is a significant difference in terms of what it is that you're asking.
So I could talk about this topic all day long.
Yeah. Is there a pub nearby?
But I won't. But I would like to offer that one of the critical things that I think we need to ensure we are doing is not only understanding the testing and the results. Actually, I'm going to differentiate. There's water sampling and then there's water testing. Volunteers can easily do water sampling. Water testing is, as you already described, should be done by a certified lab that everybody could say the results are non-questionable, except for those rare scientists that want to complain about it. But we, for example, have heard from SSEA over the last several years that we've got blue-green algae in South Bay at the 4 meter to 9 meter depth. And they are saying it's not likely it's going to have any human impact. However, perhaps they don't know that all the cottagers take water out of the bay. It's quite likely that their water intakes are at the 4-meter mark. And so any examples of blue-green algae at any level in the water column should be flagged immediately as a crisis that we immediately take action on. And when we know that there is no ability for any water treatment system to purify the bacteria that comes from blue-green algae, we have a crisis. And so we have the data. We have nobody telling us it's a crisis. We have nobody understanding that our residents pull the water from those depths. I think we have a massive mismatch, and I think it's sensitivities to those issues and many others that we need to be paying attention to. Thank you.
Thank you.
So what do you need from us at this moment?
I think at this point, what I would suggest that we do is I will take the input from council that I've heard. With the committee of a whole permission, I would appreciate the opportunity to speak specifically with Councillor Graziano. I am sensitive to not wanting to speak to one council without the whole, as has been raised today, but being able to have a better understanding about what are some of the concerns inside the inland lakes. That would help to be able to shape the RFP.
I think you better have Councillor Bocheck on that list as well.
Certainly.
And Councillor Birdcoat.
Yeah. Anyway, so if I can do that, then it helps to enrich the overall understanding of what are some of the background concerns that the council has, so that we can ensure that any RFP that comes forward. What we'll do is we will prepare for Greg Mariotti and Kaylee a proposal in terms of the workshops that we would suggest undertaking and move that forward as a recommendation in terms of the next steps. The concern that I'll just flag right now is that as you have been asking for an RFP, we've been trying hard to get you to an RFP so that you can get somebody or somebody's in place for next year. The more work that we do right now on this end, will delay that RFP. I would suggest to you that that's valuable work to do, but we'll have to work out and come forward to committee of a whole and council with how you're going to address your water quality monitoring next year. If the RFP doesn't get out and you get bids on time for next year, so you're running up against some time frame challenges right now.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick question. Does the archipelago do any kind of testing at this time, and what kind of testing do they do?
They do quite limited testing.
Really? Okay. Trying to think of another jurisdiction that would be similar to ours. I can't think of too many. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, and through your worship, just one question. Even though additional conversations may delay your progress on the RFP, do you think there's an opportunity through these conversations to simplify some of what we've been trying to? I mean, as you go through these conversations, get a more streamlined output for what we want as an effective monitoring management solution.
I would say that I suspect within the inland lakes that the answer would be yes. I could land on something with apologies to the councillors from Georgian Bay. It's a different kettle of fish. There might be a pun in there. Just because of how much more complicated the water quality variety or variability is within the near shore of Georgian Bay. So how's that for a non-answer?
No, I mean, I guess, is a solution maintaining some of the partners as long as they can provide the data in a standard format that would be consistent across the different service providers.
Why don't we take that under consideration in the discussions with Greg? We can look at what how we adjust, or if and how we might adjust the process from here to suit council's needs.
CEO Marriott.
If I may, you know, this discussion has been really good because I think we're at the point here that we're considering an RFP that is very fundamental to our water quality analysis for the township. And so it sounds like let's get it right. Instead of rushing it, let's get it right. And if it might take some more time, it takes more time. Where I'm going with this is that we may run the risk of not doing the full suite of testing and involving all the different associations that we have done in the past. My question is, does missing some data for a year really affect drastically the outcome of having a good system in place for the year after? And if we're willing to say, you know what, we may miss some testing next summer for the sake of getting a good RFP in process for, you know, 2025 to 2030, then I would, you know, I would make the unpopular suggestion to say, let's do the paperwork properly and then go out in the field and implement that paperwork.
Councillor Cooper.
Excuse me. I think that's a very good suggestion, Greg. I might suggest that we do have in the interim, at least on coastal Georgian Bay, players in place. So, you know, we can, if nothing else, carry on with the current program. Obviously, our longer term goal is to use the same standards and data getting the same standards and data from all the organizations. So we're not looking at apples and oranges. And so I would encourage that. And the other thing I would suggest is that I think it would be very helpful to have you know, a little bit of a working group for the inland lakes and another for coastal Georgian Bay is a way to do that with Greg, so we can feed him some of the things that we're thinking about and have been thinking about for the last few years, and the reason that we're coming forward with an RFP. So there you go. That's my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Graziano.
Thank you, Worship. And I was going to suggest something in a similar line as Councillor Cooper in that, yes, I agree with CEO Mariotti's suggestion that, you know, let's build this right the first time and really try to give it as much consideration as we can without being concerned about timelines. We do have Dr. Pachow Fraser's group that we've used this past year. Aside from a few hiccups from a volunteer perspective, which I'm sure we can easily overcome, perhaps they could, you know, endeavor to do it again as an interim measure. But that I'll leave to our CAO to recommend. And with regards to working group on the inland lake side, yes, I think that's a prudent suggestion. Perhaps the two working groups, should the Bay Area councillors decide to create one, perhaps they'll also consider a game of dodgeball between the two. So there we go. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Pickleball.
What was that?
I don't know.
I'm sorry. We're trying to build this properly, which I understand totally and I agree with. But I've just heard two councillors say, well, we got to keep the same thing going while we're trying to build. And our CEOs just suggested that we may have gaps because we've got to sit down and figure out what it is we need. So I guess my question is, can we have that? Is it possible even to have the overlap of continuing with what's been in place while at the same time trying to build up a proper RFP for those who will be doing the work for us? Because that's what we're talking. I mean, we're having both conversations right now.
If I guess if we're going to broaden the scope and have working groups and involve, you know, the likes of Greg as part of the working groups, this all now starts to cost. So do we want to keep doing some testing next year, as well as try to develop a real fulsome RFP through working groups? Or do we want to maybe divert some of the, costs that are going to testing more to the front end and designing the system to then spend the money in 2025 and do a fulsome, analysis based on the outcomes of the working groups and the different,
Yeah, and that's the question we're trying to answer, and all we're getting in response right now from council, all you're hearing is, yes, but keep the testing going. Which is not quite the answer we're looking for, is it? So we got to come up with an answer here. And to be honest, I think the work done by McMaster and Pat Shaw Fraser has been, I mean, it's monumental. It's stuff. I don't think we want to have a gap in that. However, I agree. We got to build something that's going to work right down the road.
I'm quite good at giving sort of ambiguous answers, so I apologize, but the answer would be this: there's no harm in continuing the monitoring. There's also no harm in having a gap in the monitoring. So to Greg's point, which is that, I mean, back to that notion that ecosystems don't change that quickly. And so if you don't have the data, chances are that the data is not going to be changing that much year over year over year. And if you don't have a management course in mind, well, what use is the data? What we could do for you, again, with Greg's, with the CAO's permission, because I feel like I'm talking to myself when I say that. What we could do would be to look at, with the consultants that you have doing the water quality monitoring around, and assess, like, what do they think of in terms of what they're studying that they would like to continue, absolutely, outside of some of the other course of water quality monitoring that may be less important. There are areas within the municipality that have not changed for many, many, many years. So you could ease the pressure up, and if there's sort of certain questions that help with getting at some of the RFP directions, then maybe it's best to continue those, but give us some time to design that.
Councillor Hayes.
Thank you. Love this idea of workshops, but when it comes to ongoing sampling or testing or whatever we want to call it, there is something that is unique that has taken place for the last 2 years. Dr. Chow Fraser and her team have been testing for, maybe is it called phytoplankton, or anyways, it's something. It's glass plate technology, and they have been doing that now. This year was the second year. Nobody else has ever done it in our waters. Greg, you know from a conversation you and I had that the GBB and their technical document has talked about nearshore water sampling or water testing for some reasons. So presumably it's to do similar things to what Dr. Chow Fraser is doing. So I would say that from my perspective, given that that's totally new, that's not sampling and testing and for results. It's a totally new thing that her doctoral students are working on that is supposed to give us insights into the near shore. And I think that should continue. Hopefully it's going to teach us something about things that we don't know about yet as a scientific community. I'm not that part of that community, I'm just saying. But anyways, so I would be okay with not doing sampling and sending it off to a lab, but I would think that this program they've had, maybe an accelerated version of it, to hopefully give us new insights is, I think, a critical step. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor. And just very briefly, 2 things about the testing on Georgian Bay through McMaster to remind everybody. One, we don't pay for the staff at all. Basically, our cost is the equipment, providing a location for them to set up a little mini sort of storage area office. But all the labor is paid through McMaster, including Professor Pat Chow Fraser. So how many places in the municipal world and across Ontario wouldn't love to have that kind of program? And I think it'd be ill-advised to drop it myself, because you know, if we drop it, they'll go somewhere else. They're already doing work in the Grand River area, and if we say, well, you know, we're going to go off it for this year, we may not have them back, and I think that would be a big loss. So that would be my 2 cents. Thank you.
I think it's interesting to contemplate, at least in my mind, that discussion that got us to having Mr. Mason in front of us today started almost exactly a year ago through budget deliberations. And the fact that we're spending money on water testing for the number of different organizations, and we're asking questions of whether it was worth it in this, you know, organization A versus B versus C. And here we are a year later, and we have budget discussions on Wednesday. And, you know, part of our discussion is going to have to be how much money are we spending on water testing this coming year. In addition to, we now will have some testing on whether you want to call this an RFP, working group proposal, dream machine. I don't know what we're going to call it. But I think that part of our decision, I'm afraid, has to be financial. And where are we going to invest those funds? And to what degree do you want to defend that expenditure to our taxpayers versus some other expenditure? So I think that's part of what we have to contemplate going forward. But I mean, there's no doubt in my mind, there's an appetite amongst us, I think council and staff, and certainly a portion of our residents, to be monitoring the water or testing it or whatever term is the right term, and B, then responding to it in a way that helps us protect those waters going forward. And with that, shall we say that enough of this discussion for today? Okay, then I'm going to read a motion. But before I do that, I'm going to say thank you very much for making the trip down and your flexibility with our timing and everything else. We do appreciate that and all the work you're doing. And there's no doubt in my mind, people here plan on utilizing you some more. You've been warned. So I got moved by Councillor Bochek, seconded by Councillor Jarvis. Be it resolved that the Committee of the Whole receives the draft terms of reference for the Water Quality Monitoring Program RFP for information. All those in favor? And that is carried. I'm going to suggest, because we've been sitting down for about 2 hours now, that we stand up for 10 minutes. And then next on our list, I would say, is short-term rental registration update. So let's start that conversation in 10 minutes, which will be All right. Welcome back, everyone. And our next topic of discussion is short-term rental registration update. And I believe, Mr. Chan, that is you, because I don't see Mr. Bondar. Oh, I was wrong. Okay. Chief Undum, go ahead, please.
Microphone.
Can you hear me now? So, Your Worship, I'm going to say a number of people within our organization have been contributing to this. I know it says our two bylaw officers, but I think first of all, we need to thank, because just about everybody within our organizations had a chance to look at it and has been helping out with assisting it. So I want to thank all of our staff for that first. Second of all, we've taken a number of, I'm going to say, pieces that council asked us to look into. We've worked with them, investigated them, and we've kind of come up with a product that we hope meets the needs of council and meets the needs of our short-term rentals and our residents, to give them a peace of mind for complaints that hopefully will ensure that we can actively act on them in a timely fashion, and as well as ensuring the good neighbor policy that I hope will be able to work out there. So you've got the report. I'm going to let council ask the questions, because there's a number of staff that may be able to answer it because of everybody that's been working on it. So I know Jen has been prepared our slide presentation, and I'll let Jen go over that with you if you wish to go through it, or we can just move on to comments. Just keeping in mind the time of day.
Let's go through it fairly quickly to get everybody up to speed where you're at. I mean, I know I have a couple of questions. I won't be surprised if other people have a couple of questions, but maybe if you do a quick overview for the advantage also of our audience.
Are you gonna go, Jen?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Oh, good afternoon, Chair and members of Committee of the Whole. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to the short-term rental registration program. It's very important that we emphasize that it's not a licensing program. And you can see that some of the information that we're going to cover today will be about just where we are at, what we are intending to go forward with, and how things will be monitored, as well as some information that will be very unique to the township about how we are going to support our hosts to become more sustainable in their hosting experience. Next slide, please. Who's running the slides? Is it me that's running the slide? What's that? Sorry, oh. This is almost silly. What's happening? Oh, there we are. Okay. All right. So just to clarify, we did have 2 public meetings in September, and they were relatively well attended. We also had an online forum for people to be able to express their opinions. And we also had cards that we gave out to every person that was at the event. If they had a comment that was not captured, they could put it on the card to be a little bit more anonymous and be able to still get their feedback in. And we also allowed and encouraged the public through social media and also at the meeting to provide their comments back via an email string or through their counselors. And we have compiled all of that in the document that we presented to you today. And so do you want to speak to this part, Albert, with respect to the bylaw application process?
So residents begin registering using an online portal where all documents are fillable and submitted to the township staff. Township staff will then review the application and contact the property owner for any missing information. Once application is complete, permit will be auto-populated and sent to property owner and Granicus. Granicus will be our online provider for information. Granicus is already, for example, that would be an example of the monthly status report that I would get, saying how many units are actively in the township and how many would be licensed and how many would be specifically to look at.
So thank you. And then just to clarify, Granicus is a neutral third party that is not specific to any type of online travel agency, be it Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com, Expedia, Hotels.com, Jane's Cottages. There's many, many platforms. Granicus will be able to look at all of them impartially and provide information as well as be able to monitor duplication of listings on various platforms. That's super important for this particular project because there's no way of knowing for sure how somebody advertises their listing, and one particular platform over another might be missed. And so, as you can see here, that they address over 60 plus short-term rental websites. What's also important is that they do keep an eye, Granicus does keep an eye on the average revenue rental, the average nights listed, and also provides feedback on information with respect to how many people may be in that unit, which will also be complemented by the information that is provided through the registration/permitting process. And then also there will be the compliance monitoring agency to be able to support and make sure that people have access to safe hosting opportunities as well as contact information for when something goes bump in the night or there's something that isn't quite appropriate during the day. Granicus will be able to make that initial call to the host based on the information provided through the registration. And so when we look at the short-term rental bylaw that we've provided to you, this is in draft form, you will see that this is what we're really looking to highlight in terms of the key items. So we are definitely going to restrict the number of people sleeping in a per bedroom situation to 2. There is 1 parking space per living area, and it would have to be on a hard surface driveway. And we heard that feedback with respect to people that were commenting and complaining about others that were parking on grass, etc. We'll make sure that there's a level ABC fire extinguisher in the cooking area and BC extinguishers at every other floor, which will help for safety. And the owner or responsible person will be required to attend or be available within 60 minutes of the emergency. And so the good news about this also is that the short-term rental draft bylaw will require information like the copy of the registration form, the address of the premises, information with respect to the guest log, which can or cannot necessarily come from an online travel agency like Airbnb and VRBO. There'll be a clear information identifier about the code of conduct and a QR code provided inside the facilities that will talk about the bylaws so that people can get access to the information they need. And of course, most importantly, the emergency services statement and an approved site plan, floor plan, parking plan, waste management plan, and sustainability plan. So the registration so far is being proposed to you today for a light rental host of 20 days or less on whatever platform they use would be $250 per year. And then if they were to be able to provide a sustainability plan, it would be at a 10% discount of $225. And then likewise, $1,000 for any host that is anticipating over 21 days with $100 off 10% if they do provide an approved sustainability plan. So this will be issued for 1 year or until change of ownership or any type of information about the property changes, and it will be on the onus of the owner to provide this information to council. To the bylaw department. And so this is just an idea of what is in an approved application, and I'm sure you have that in front of you there. So one thing that we do want to talk about, and this is unique to the Township of Georgian Bay, is that we are going to ask our residents to participate and submit a sustainability plan. And so we're going to ask them for efforts when it comes to reducing their carbon footprint, reducing their energy consumption, promoting the local culture, and then also ensuring that they are doing their part to make achievable goals in the reduction of their energy bills. And we have put together a platform that people can very easily create a sustainability plan with that will be available online. They can make their choices and decisions in various categories as to what they want to focus on in that calendar year. And so long as they make a certain level of point system, they'll be eligible to have a sustainability plan approved. And so, do you want to talk about this part, Albert, with respect to registration revocation?
The registered issuer shall have the authority to refuse and issue or renew the registration and revoke or suspend a registration. Upon application to council can authorize or exempt this bylaw in respect to the owner's premises if they deem it to be an appropriate use for this specific case.
Thank you. Okay, and then these are some orders that can be issued for the short-term rental. And then, do you want to talk about the AMPs, or Mr. Chair, is it the will of council to talk about AMPs, or are you familiar with the AMPs program? You're familiar with it, okay. Okay, so in order to align this with our strategic pillars, staff have worked very carefully to make sure that the environmental protection, fiscal responsibility and technological efficiencies, and customer experience and customer engagement are the top 3 priorities for this project. And so you can see below in each bullet how important these items are and how they have intentionally aligned back to the strategic pillars that are in the strategic plan. Any questions?
That was a nice succinct overview of those, with that program. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're
Appreciate
welcome. If it's okay, Mr. Chair, we're okay to stop sharing. There we
Okay.
go. Okay.
And so now we're going to go and have a few questions. I think we're at that level, and for some, I guess Councillor Jarvis was napping because Councillor Predko was the first one with his hand up.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions and points of just clarification or suggestion. Right now, the short-term rental period is 20 days or less, which is 1 day less than 3 weeks or 1 day less than 7 weekends. Would it be more practical for the renters or the hosts to have it 21 days or less, just so it's an even number of weeks rather than cutting it off by 1 day? It seems like a arbitrary.
That's a great suggestion through you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any issue with that, and we can certainly adjust that.
And my other, I like the sustainability plan idea. I think that's something that could be a very positive feature for Georgian Bay Township if it's included in the registry or somehow it comes into our marketing material that we're environmentally and climate friendly in terms of implementing a sustainability plan. My only questions then are around evaluating these plans. So I know right now they look like they're great plans, but they're going to be very subjective in terms of the evaluation. Someone's going to have to be looking at pictures and documentation, and is that going to be if everybody comes back with a sustainability plan, is that a sustainable practice to review them?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we hope that's a wonderful problem to have, that everybody does submit a sustainability plan. In order to avoid the subjectivity, but also include the individuality of a sustainability plan, we will have an already measured sustainability template that people can check off what they want to do, and so long as they get to a number of 10 or whatever our final mark is, they will have self-qualified for a sustainability plan. And just like this entire program, it's about self-attestation. And if they have submitted a sustainability plan and a sustainability plan was not followed by an audit, a random audit, or because a neighbor identifies that there is activity isn't going forward, then we would be able in the sustainability department to be able to provide feedback as to what's going on, and to ensure that there isn't anything like greenwashing happening or people looking for a quick buck to be able to remove the $100 off the fee. So the qualifications within our department are pretty heavy in terms of not only short-term rental accreditation, but also sustainable education. So we feel pretty confident that we'll be able to provide that feedback.
And can you give them a credit if they have a food cycler for their food waste management?
Well, you see, that would be measured as well, right? So that would have an X point, so to speak, of value towards the sustainability plan.
And then my last question is around the MAT tax that we had talked about before. So, and this will be controversial again, given the feedback we had at the town hall meetings, but there are some people who feel that there are still, these residents are businesses operating with residential zoning rather than commercial zoning. Do we still have an opportunity in the future to revisit whether or not there's a MAT tax attached to some of these short-term rentals? And I think obviously there'd be others who would be opposed to that idea, but just wondering if the door is open.
That is actually going to be part of the first draft budget proposal, is to introduce a MAT tax. And I know our neighbors right now are charging 4%. We're actually, staff is proposing 2%, so that we still remain competitive amongst our neighbors. And staff want to kind of make it clear as well that the MAT tax would not be applicable to our ratepayers. So let's say a resident of Georgian Bay Township wants to go and enjoy spending time somewhere else within an Airbnb or whatever you want to say, wherever you want to go within the township. If you're a resident, then you can
An exemption.
make an exception. So we want to make sure that it doesn't negatively affect our ratepayers in any way, shape, or form.
And then I guess on that, just to clarify that you'd be looking at a MAT tax for only properties zoned as residential. You wouldn't be, again, including this in commercial properties, or you would be as well?
That is something for council to decide if they wish to have a MAT tax across the board, or whether council wants to only have a MAT tax for the short-term rentals.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So 2 or 3 things. First of all, I wanted to say that Councillor Predko brought up the 21-day thing. I thought that was excellent. It's an important point. I had it written down as well. But another thing that I remember the discussions we had when we first started talking about short-term rentals. Part of the discussion was about the sort of management and enforcement around short-term rentals. And I realize we've hired more people now to help us with enforcement, but the reality is that real short-term rentals, very short-term rentals, 3-day rentals, party weekend rentals, are a different kettle of fish from 7 days or 14 days or 21 days. And I don't see anything about that here. So that's my first question. What about that? Then I have a couple more questions.
Anyone want to take that?
Through your worship, great question, Councillor Cooper. We are preparing that. That's part of the Grannis situation. So we will have a hotline that's posted on our website, being able to for people to call that number. When they call that number with Granicus, Granicus will be now have the contact information for the property owner, and their clock starts to tick. They've got 60 minutes to respond to that, say a noise complaint, whatever complaint there is, and if they have it resolved within 60 minutes, no harm, no foul. If it goes beyond the 60 minutes, then by law enforcement officers will take the action necessary to correct that, and there'll be fines once a bylaw officer is engaged. And if we do find a confrontation or an issue that goes forward, then fines will be accordingly as per the AMPS program: first offense, second offense, third offense, and after that we're going to a provincial court. So with that, we hope that this is the solution to greater enforcement and a greater opportunity for our I'm going to say short-term rental people to be able to comply and be able to get their property in compliance in a relatively quick fashion. And we also have the code of conduct for renters that so we'll be able to get that information, and now bylaw can enforce after the period, because we do not need to issue the ticket to the individual in person. We can mail it, fax it, email it down the road. So we have a greater opportunity to get enforcement, because now we'll be able to use the evidence from a police service. If they're called there for a noise complaint, that they'll be aware of to contact us, and we can enforce some other laws as well.
Thank you, Tony. But I guess really what I'm also driving at here, are we missing a marketing opportunity for 3-day rentals? In other words, I wonder if we should have a sort of a 1, 2, 3-day fee that's a different one from a 21 days. That 21 days is quite a long period of time, and that's not, I wouldn't even call that a short-term rental. So I'm throwing out the concept that this is a revenue generating initiative in a sense, and you might want to think about the real short-term rentals and charge accordingly. So that's one suggestion. The other question for you, a couple more. One is that is registration mandatory? And if it is, how are you going to enforce that?
Through your worship, the interest is to deal with the negative behavior. So a lot of times the short-term rental issues are the behavior of those renting. But we're also trying to incumbent being in this township to foster our relationships with the host and have a good working relationship with the host. So we're going to leave it up to the host to deal with the problem first. And if the behavior continues where I'm going back 4 weekends in a row, then I will be able to deal with that host accordingly and issue fines accordingly to address the negative behavior from that, because obviously the message isn't getting through. But then it'll also allow me to deal with those residents who are, or those renters who are problematic. And that's our interest in the whole registration. So everyone will be registered through Granicus. We will know how much or how often the STRA owner is registering their property for. We'll know how much revenue they're making. A lot of things will be coming from reports to me on a regular basis to update me on the status. So even that person who's claiming to rent for 21 days, and if they're renting more than that, that will give me a warning bell or warning sign. I will address it with them as well, and that may bump them up to the past 21 days if they are continuing to do that kind of behavior.
Thank you for that. And I guess I was really, that's more enforcement again. I'm talking about how you're going to, there are a lot of people in my community who rent out to same people every year. And I don't think they're going to volunteer and register, be out of their minds. So I just, I wanted to know what you were gonna do about that. Are you gonna go property to property and say, are you registered? Are you? So you're not. You're catching them through Granicus is my guess. So is that correct? And then I want to just sort of ask one other question.
So through you, your worship, Counselor, if you turn around and rented it to your son for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and that's a direct contact with you, there's no way that we're going to be able to track that. It's for the person who's advertising, looking for general public or other people to come into their residence. So the individual I'm gonna say Mrs. Smith, who's looking to give it to her son or giving it to a family member or that, and is charging, because they charge all different fees, they could be just charging for the cleaning fee or whatever. We're not going to catch that person who rents their place once or twice. And that's not likely where our problems are, because that's a communication between, I'm going to say, if you were renting it with you and your son, and if your son acts up, we're quite sure that your neighbors are going to let you know, and hopefully as a good neighbor, you're going to deal with that. This is to catch the individuals who are coming up, I'm going to say, for the weekend and having the bachelor party and have no respect for our citizens, our residents, and those are the ones that we want to enforce.
Thank you, and that's perfect. You're you're really tracking it through Granicus, not through personal relationships. It's not necessarily relatives. It's people that have been coming back for the same period of time for 10, 15 years. And I just don't think they'd be inclined to volunteer to pay a fee when they haven't had to pay one before. And there's really no work to looking after what they're doing anyway. Final point is hard surface parking was one of your points. I don't think we have any hard surface out in Georgian Bay, so you might want to think about moorage because that's the same thing as parking. Thank you. At least I don't have any hard surface parking.
Much of your island's hard enough to support an automobile, I would think. Councillor Cooper?
Well, not very even I'd like to see you try and drive a car on my island.
What the issue was, your worship, is that we're getting some residents that are bringing in, having these large party or gatherings, and then they're parking on septic tanks, grass, and everything like this. And we want to ensure that the host is well aware of what's going on their property and enforce that, be respectful and maintain our infrastructure that's either your private infrastructure or our municipal infrastructure.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelton.
Thank you. Please bear with me. I have some questions, some comments along the way here. My first question or comment is the word day is not defined. And in Honey Harbor, if I park for a weekend, day starts whenever I arrive on Friday, day, Saturday and Sunday, 3-day parking, 3 days. So a day is a day or any part thereof. I suspect that we want to have that included here. So that if I'm doing, for example, if I only counted Saturday, Sunday and not Friday, when I arrive on Friday, I could do 20 rentals versus 7 rentals if I'm counting Friday. So I think it has a big impact. If I could suggest that we consider that. Your application forms, I'm assuming, are going to require both an email and a phone number. Is the phone number going to be required to be a textable phone number so that you can have instant emergency access to that person? Because texting would be a far more instant capability. And if we're seeking complete accessible information, that would be, I think, a critical element. So just bear with me here. I've made some highlights. We were talking about parking, and Councillor Cooper made the observation of parking for a water access property. And given that half of our properties on the township are water access, I think parking for water access properties needs to be identified. And I wanted to share with you some feedback I got from at least one marina operator, where he said that he hates Airbnb tenants, if you will, with a passion, because they have zero respect for his marina, his parking, or any of the things that are going on in the marina, because these are transients and they just come in, do whatever they want, and they leave. And so I would ask, please, in your code of conduct document that you have, that you would include a code of conduct for behavior at the marina where these people are coming from and have to park, because that will be another behavior characteristic that right now is really irritating some of the marine operators. Short-term rentals, okay. In item 2.4, where you're talking about the requirements of the bylaw will not apply to blah, 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 and you indicate boat or vessel. I hope you are aware, we have a floating vessel in Honey Harbor, which is rented out as an Airbnb today. If you didn't know that, I will point it out to you and help you understand where it is. But I would suggest that a boat or a vessel is a candidate for Airbnb. And you heard perhaps earlier in the meeting where we were concerned with the issue of large liveaboard boats elsewhere. So we already know that there are real estate agents that are selling boating outposts, being tiny islands with a dock with an intent to put boats out there. And it wouldn't surprise me that they're trying to turn those boats into Airbnb type scenarios. So please, let's not forget about that as another risk, if you will, from a consideration. Item 3.3, you're talking about the provision of parking. I'm just back on the parking thing. So you've got one parking space per guest room. I'm not sure well, that might not be appropriate, because if somebody's coming up for a weekend, if they don't put 4 people in a car, that might not be the characteristic, but I won't argue because it's more constrained, but I just offer that you may find that you don't need one parking spot per guest room, which is what you've got in there right now. So it's something maybe to consider down the road. However, if I could, we have experiences where Airbnb people have rented out their property, and the person coming in, again, water access property, they're not renting their boat with the property. And so the guy comes in with a boat and a trailer. So now he has parking requirements for a boat and a trailer, and now he's going to launch his boat at a likely public boat launch, or maybe private or marina. We'll get into the costs of those boat launches later, but I suspect that those are also considerations that we need to be aware of, that are water access properties specific and not so much the drive to. But I just wanted to make sure that you had visibility into those types of issues that are surfacing. So I have a question here. Just tell you where I am. I'm on 4.1, and it's talking about the application being a corporation, blah, blah, blah. And then if we jump down to 11.3, it says, no one shall use or operate for commercial activities. Well, isn't an Airbnb by definition a commercial activity? So I'm confused in the wording here. If I'm confused, other people are likely going to be confused, and a lawyer will have a heyday with it. But in 11.3, you're specifically calling out no one shall use or operate for commercial activities, and yet by definition, it's a commercial activity. So I think you're probably suggesting, stag parties or bridal parties or whatever you want to call it, other things. But I'd say there's, anyway, I think a lawyer is going to have a heyday with that. Because it's by definition a commercial activity. And so you're on one hand talking about a corporation owning it. Anyways, I'm confused by that inconsistency. Maybe do you have an answer?
Yeah, I would suggest maybe we've been talking about this for a year. We've been going back and forth. We've done public consultations. We've listened. We've tweaked the bylaw and the process to follow council's input. I think we're getting into some real granularity here. I would say we're pretty much there. Let's put it into place. Let's fine tune it as it's working. In terms of the concerns that some marina owners have with people parking their car at the marina and being less disrespectful as Airbnb guests, that marina owner can simply refuse to say, I'm not having you parking in my place. I don't know how a short-term rental policy is going to go down to certain degrees of detail to capture every single possible imaginable event. You can't do that. At some point, let's run with this. It's been a year. We've made it, self-sufficient. We've made it as pragmatic as possible, as easy to manage as possible. And otherwise, we're going to be here for another year.
So with all due respect, this is committee of the whole. We have an opportunity to look at something in draft. I thought you were asking and looking for feedback and comments. I'm providing them. As far as the marine operators are going, a code of conduct description helping the renters understand what their expectations are at the marina, I think is a reasonable thing to put in a code of conduct. So if I could go on here, and I'm going to put Kaylee on the spot here. What is the building code requirements for pumping out a septic tank?
I think it's 1/3 full of your scum and your sludge.
Right. Okay. So in here we have not only a record of system pump outs, but the tank has been pumped out and inspected in the last 3 years, which is inconsistent with best practice guidance on dealing with septic tanks. So I would strongly encourage you to discuss with Kaylee what best practices are in dealing with septic systems, and let's not put wording in here that is inconsistent with some of those best practices.
I'm going to interrupt you for a moment.
Sure.
Because I have moved by you, seconded by Councillor Jarvis, be it resolved the committee of the whole does now extend past 4:30, or I'm going to have to cut you off completely. But no later than 6 p.m. All those in favor? You may now continue. We can't cut you off.
I don't know what unlock thermostat is. Sorry, what unlock thermostat is? That's part of the sustainability recommendations.
What would you like to know about it, Councillor?
I don't know what the word means.
To unlock a thermostat?
A lot of establishments, the thermostat is locked and you can't adjust it.
Okay, so are we saying that a green plan would be to unlock the thermostat?
It would be a consideration for your sustainability plan to unlock your thermostat.
So that they can turn it up or turn it down?
That's correct.
So that when in the summertime they can turn it down and chew up more energy, and in the wintertime turn it up and chew up more energy?
Alternatively, if they don't have any control over the thermostat and they are from a country that exercises a different temperature in general,
right,
the guest will open the window and the energy will go out the window.
Okay,
So
I now understand what you mean by unlock thermostat. I don't think that the words are descriptive to accomplish what you're achieving. That's just my opinion. And I'd also offer that if I have a new build, improving my insulation and windows and doors, how could I do that if it's a new build? It just seemed odd to me that that would be a trigger point for sustainability. And For you, item 11.7, it says, instead of, I think you mean no person, it says no register shall rent any guest room. I think you mean no person will rent any guest room. It's on the bylaw. 11.7. I don't think you mean no register. I just
Probably registrant.
registrant or person.
Mr. Chair, while we're waiting for that, I just want to clarify that the short-term bylaw will not be able to enforce anything in a private marina, as the private marina is its own entity and we don't have any authority over that.
And I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for our code of conduct that we're putting into the buildings that people are renting, that gives them the recommendation on what their behavior should be. That code of conduct could easily include just behavior at the marina when they're having their needing to use. And, you know, contrary to a comment I heard earlier, if I'm a client at a marina and I rent out my property as an Airbnb, if the marina operator is going to come back and give me a hard time about it, that's going to be a bit of a problem for the marina operator and in my relationship with him. So I think it's incumbent on us to, in this code of conduct, cover these issues, which are real issues. They're not imagined issues, they're real.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think what we'll do then is we'll just encourage our guests to be welcoming and kind to all merchants in the Township of Georgian Bay, as not only will these merchants be visiting marinas, but they'll be visiting the grocery store, the pizza stand, the coffee shop, etc. So we'll just ensure that we remind them that that courteous behavior is supported.
So 11.7 needs change to the host.
Okay. Just
According to counselors. Be nice to counselors too.
Good luck with that one.
So I was delighted to see in the monetary penalty system in the presentation, you talked about first offense, second offense, third offense, but I didn't see anything in the bylaw. I'm just wondering, should it be in the bylaw or is it something separate? And I know the AMPS system today doesn't have any talk about short-term rental things. So I'm assuming that the AMPS will have to be updated to reflect the SRA once the SRA is put into place. Am I on the right path there?
Yes, through your worship, the intention is not to be using it strictly for, it's just the STRAs, and as such it will be done in the actual AMPS bylaw to incorporate for all our bylaws.
Okay. Thank you for bearing with me and all my questions and comments, but I had to cover things on behalf of my constituents. Thank you.
So I can just tell you, Councillor Hazelton, the declaration of commercial businesses in the Airbnb world has been in the court system a number of times, and however the rulings are going to go, that's what's going to dictate to whether we're going to be able to enforce whether that short-term rental is a business or it's not. Currently, we're not that lucky. However, there has been some strides made that you have businesses that are owning these residents registered in business names, and now that is in the process of being tried in the courts, and we have to wait to see where that comes up. So, yeah, we are aware of it, but we're not sure at this point.
That's fine. I just wanted to surface it because it's an unknown for me and it just seemed to be a little conflicting, but thank you for that.
Councillor Jarvis, once upon a time, I did see your hand.
Yeah, my questions were answered.
Okay, thank you. I just have a couple. When you're referring to parking in hard surface, does that include gravel? Okay. Just want to make sure it wasn't asphalt or things like that or concrete, but porous gravel counts as a hard surface. Okay.
We should break that out.
The
Definition a little better.
The penalties that you will be potentially charging, to what degree will it be the renter versus the host, or possibly both? Um, and- because and I'm going to take the example of that island rentals, and we know we have at least a couple island rentals that are problematic. Who knows how many we have that aren't problematic, but we have a couple that are. I don't think the bylaw officer is going to get out there Friday night at 1 a.m. To enforce things. Yes, there will be, so that leads to another question. The log, is that supposed to include everybody who's in the building or just the person who's paying for the rental? Question one. Two, can you charge more than one person when it's a noise bylaw? Can you decide to charge all 8 guests plus the host?
So there are opportunities where what our goal is compliance. Individuals, if there's 40 people drinking alcohol off the property, then the police have the opportunity to charge all 40. The same thing will apply with the bylaw. If there's 40 people breaking the law, then potentially we can write 40 tickets. Will we? It might be a little difficult. I do want to be able to get back home. One against 40 people might be a little difficult. However, we do have we have it built into our provisions that if a host has not done their due diligence in educating that individual, then the host stands a chance to be fined as well. So it's not we're just picking on the renters, or we're not just picking on the hosts. Our goal will be to I'm going to say, the person who is breaking the law, to be able to make them pay for their actions. Hosts have responsibilities as well, and if they're not fulfilling their obligations and their responsibilities, then we'll be looking at charging them as well.
And I guess if I can just take that one step further, my concern is the host rents the property out. They have all the postings like they're supposed to on the kitchen wall or wherever they put them. And so they're just going to say, I did what I was supposed to do. You can't find me. And they're going to use that excuse weekend after weekend. I would like to think that if you're finding 40 people for drinking on the neighbor's property, you should be fining the host 40 times.
So I can tell you that the host has a responsibility. When a complaint comes in, they have a 1-hour window to get the situation corrected. If it's not corrected, the host becomes liable, that we will start to go after them. As I said, it's compliance is our goal here, and if that property owner is a good host and responds well to the problems that may arise, because we do have individuals who don't respect, I'm going to say, rules, and they're going to do whatever. But that host has the privilege of revoking that rental and kicking them off their property at 2 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And that can be enforced with police presence.
Through your worship, also just to let you know that through Granicus with the 24/7 hotline, as that person puts in their complaint, their information or further information from them can be shared. So Granicus will actually take any video evidence, any statements from them, or make them aware of the form of the statement, provide it to them, and have that package rolled up and set for me on Monday, so that when I come in, I can address that behavior with the renter, which is far from what I have now. When I have a complaint, I go there, and whether the complainant or the renters answer the door, they don't have to, or no obligation to provide me with any ID. I don't have a contact or a dealing with if from that actual owner of that STRA to provide me that information forthwith so that I can address that behavior or problematic people. For example, I had fireworks this year at some of the STRAs, And they simply claimed that their cousins had set off the fireworks and they were gone and they weren't there. So I had nobody to hold accountable, even though I knew where that was. And for that reason, if the STR owner is going to provide me that information, I can forthwith give fines out accordingly. Now, again, like I said, if I'm going back there 2 weekends in a row, you can be rest assured that I will be dealing with the owner of that Airbnb the following week.
My next comment was, and I'm following up on Councillor Hazelton's, I think it was Councillor Hazelton's observations, but I'm a little concerned when you say this won't, this does not apply to, I'll call it tourist establishments, and then you go vessel or similar commercial use. To me, absolutely you should include a vessel, especially given all the challenges we're having with floating contraptions that some people think are vessels. And if they're going to have a vessel parked at the dock and rent it out, I want that to be covered as well. But I also think, you know, trailers were mentioned in conjunction with marinas, but also people may be trailering up to the Airbnb or whatever it is, the short-term rental, with a trailer, with a boat, and they're parking the trailer on the grass. But what if they bring a camping trailer, a tent trailer? I think we should make it very clear that the accommodations on this property include not only the rooms in the property, in the buildings, but any out. I mean, it's not unusual for people to have these party weekends and there's 3 or 4 tents on the grass, or a travel trailer or a van or what have you. And I think that we should be further inclusive to make sure that under some such situations, those should be covered as well.
Through your worship, I totally agree. What you guys are bringing up is not something that we aren't aware of. We know it's happening, like May 2-4 weekend. It's the kickoff and everybody's showing up. But you do have to understand that we're doing baby steps, and we are limited in enforcement. We are limited in the number of officers we have, capable officers. We do bring in summer students, but even they are very limited in the ability to approach a large gathering or group. There are safety issues and parameters that we have to work within. It's a guideline for now. We need to start. And again, having even 200, 300 and some to deal with right off the get-go for next year. We know that the others are happening and we'll subject them to by complaint and deal with it, but we will look at it moving forward, because you're absolutely right. Boats and even for us to start approaching for max tax, we're never going to have enough doors to knock on to be able to even collect on that sort of things.
I fully appreciate that this is going to be one of those, as the overused expression is, living document. It'll evolve as time goes on, but I just believe that you would be advised to include somewhere in here, call it 2.5 for that matter, that covers all accommodations on the property, not just the designated bedrooms, if you will, for people. And it's, you know, so the neighbor sends in photographs, and you see in those photographs those 2 tents and that travel trailer parked there. Odds are somebody's sleeping in those things overnight, and so you can at least use that as part of your complaint to the tenants as well as the hosts. But no, I with all this, all these suggestions you're receiving, I personally find overall a very impressive document. I think it's going to be very useful and important, and certainly I am hoping that the neighbors of the troublesome few, and I think it's important to emphasize that most people who are renting their cottages, whether it's under the table because it's the same cousin who's been using it the second week of August since 1980, or it's people who rent a few weeks a year because they want to try to pay for their property taxes. I think we have to make sure we understand that majority of hosts want to be responsible and generally are responsible, and as are most of the tenants. But we want to make sure that the troublesome few, the investor who couldn't give a damn about our township, is going to be encouraged. I'm using a nice polite word. Is going to be encouraged to be a little more respectful of neighbors.
Your worship, it's also important to clarify that if a boat, a trailer, a tent, a yurt, or any type of mobile home is listed on Airbnb or any other online travel agency, then they would be picked up by Granicus. So we know already of boats and traveling accommodations on water that are listed on short-term rental platforms. And so you'll see that commentary come back to us with the municipal accommodation tax, but it's a very good point. I don't think we have it listed here. So we'll add those in for sure to be able to make sure that
but if I make
they're
just clarify,
accompanied.
you're talking about, I'll call it the permanent additional bedrooms, but I'm also talking about the temporary ones, the ones that show up for that weekend and disappear.
Right. I think it's a good point for us to be able to review language as it goes for tents. And you're also right with respect to the majority of hosts don't want to have any type of non-compliance going on when you are involved in any type of these scenarios, be it an online rental platform or a renting car situation or Uber. They're very social, and so they're very important that each person rates the other person to be able to identify them as a good guest, be it in a car or in a home. So hosts won't want to have a bad review, and some platforms kick hosts off below a certain level. So we do have the backbone behind some of these agencies that do support municipalities in this process.
Thank you. I mean, I think Albert's a nice guy, but I don't think most hosts want to deal with him on a regular basis.
So,
And-
Your Worship, if I might just try to clean this up here, is we understand that we might not have this 100%. We have done our due diligence. We have talked to a number of municipalities, talked to the bylaw officers there, and found out what problems they're having and trying to build into it. Remember that there's the other side of the fence. As we are going to say rules and stuff in, there's other people on the other side of the fence are looking how they can bend or circumvent those rules, and we end up trying to deal with them. I think we have a very good piece to start. There's a couple things here. We'll go back and tweak the bylaw for going in December. But we need a foot to stand on come January 1st when we want to launch. And I truly believe we're there. And if council's wishes that or don't think that we are there, then tell us now, and we won't bring it back in December, and we can go back to the drawing board and move forward.
I think you've heard a number of suggestions, and Councillor Cooper has his hand up, so he may have an additional suggestion.
It's very short. Thank you, Mayor, for allowing the councilors to give some feedback on this. It's important. It's why we have COW, and I'm hoping that the staff will maybe learn something from this. And if we don't want COW to go so long, maybe it wouldn't hurt for staff to phone the odd councillor. Well, that'd be one suggestion. The other suggestion, thank you, is to the clerk for having COW on a Monday in front of council on Tuesday. It's a very useful tool to have COW in case something important or an emergency comes up. We can go right into council the next day and pass something. So I like the order that we've started. I hope it continues. Thank you.
I think that comment might be part of our calendar scheduling review that we do, I think, scheduled tomorrow, isn't it? Yes. So any other comments to share with staff with regards to this work? I believe you've done excellent work. And I think it's important to understand you received lots of suggestions today, but they're refinements. I think the bulk of the work is excellent, and I think it's very important, and I believe that many of our residents will appreciate it.
I can truly say, Your Worship, a lot of staff have we've gone deep and hard, and a lot of staff have put their comments in it, and we've looked at each one of those comments and try to do it. So I'm very happy with the work of all of staff, not just my staff. It's the whole municipal staff.
Well, I say it's greatly appreciated. And you're about to modify my.
Well, I just want to just.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I have moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Bocheck. Be it resolved, the Committee of Whole provided numerous comments in regard to the short-term rental documentation presented, and that the Committee of the Whole directs staff to bring a finalized short-term rental bylaw to Council in December 2023. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Okay. Council, are you up to talking parking lots before we go home for dinner? I mean, Mr. Sokash just walked into the room.
Your Worship, I am happy if we defer this till tomorrow. I have an appointment at 7 tonight. That's the only reason I say that, and I haven't run this by Mr. Mariotti. Shoot me daggers.
We can't go past 6. Are you more than an hour away?
I have to go to Utopia, which I think is exactly an hour, but I need to pick up my dog.
Well, why don't we initiate the conversation, and if it looks like it's going to go on forever, we'll continue it tomorrow.
I'm here to do anything you like.
All right, Council, are we ready for township operated parking lots and boat launches? And I'm going to turn it over to you, Mr. Sokash, right now.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a follow-up report from the last council meeting with respect to municipal parking lots provided for property owners in the township. While we were going through the discussion of paid parking lots or whether or not to have paid parking, the larger question of providing parking for some residents or property owners in the township, whereas other property owners are not provided the same consideration arose, and we were asked to bring this back for council to discuss at COW, and we have done so, and I've broken it into basically 3 general areas of questions: how to deal with existing lots, as well as existing boat launches, and then township areas without parking lots and boat launches, and how we could perhaps deal with them. So I can leave it there, and
all right. So basically, you would like council to discuss, and we'll take them one at a time because we may not get through them all. And with regards to parking, we got 3 options on the existing parking lots, and basically you're saying no change to existing is option 1. You know, the old do nothing other or status quo. Second one is to implement paid parking at township lots with passes available to township property owners. And the third one is to install paid parking at township lots with no passes. So all, whether they're resident or visitor, pay for their parking.
Thank you, Your Worship. That's correct.
Okay. Council, discuss. Councilor Graziano, I see your hand.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's a different perspective from that side of the diocese. That I will not answer. Just a gentle reminder. So I was, I guess, one of the moving parties or on both situations, I believe. The paid parking was a way to offset the costs that we are paying towards garbage. Yes, there will be a cost at paving the locations, but over the long run, those machines will essentially be a cash register for us, and it's a way for the transient / day tripper to give back to the community. I know on my inland lake, after a long weekend, first and foremost, those parking lots are beyond, they're overflowing with people parking there. But we as residents are left having to pick up after our day trippers and those transient visitors and campers that come up and use our facilities. And again, as we've kind of investigated and understood with respect to the overall tonnage that we as a township are paying to the District of Muskoka, it's a way to get back. So just a gentle reminder that I had moved this as a means in which to perhaps look at creative ways in getting money back from those that don't otherwise pay for garbage when visiting our municipality. I would, if given the three options without any amendments, I would opt for option number 2, paid parking with no payment required by our constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, please.
Thank you, Mayor Kutsier. And just very briefly, I think a cost benefit analysis is the only way to do these things. This is expensive to create these things, and it's fine if you're going to pay for it in 2 years, but if it takes 20 years, no thanks. So have we done any cost benefit analysis? So that's really what it comes down to when it comes to any of these things. And as far as unmanaged bin sites, if this has a bin site associated with it, because I think I heard Councillor Graziano talking about that huge expense staff-wise, or we've got a mess. So I see maybe status quo is maybe the way to go.
Mr. Sokash, cost benefit analysis.
Thank you, Your Worship. There has not been an analysis done at this point. Would be a little bit of work, which is fine. The difficulty we would have is if there was free parking provided for property owners and paid parking for visitors. It'd be very difficult to estimate what percentage of visitors we have coming. So the analysis would be shaky. In part, that's why we suggested a pilot study at a couple locations in the last council report, was to get a handle on how much revenue we may be generating. So that is my answer. If no, we haven't done the analysis, and an excuse why.
If just a follow up to that, if I could, Port Severn, just over there, we have a parking lot that you can residents can have a pass and visitors have to pay. I don't know if any residents use that for long-term parking, because I think the majority of residents who use that are there for a couple of hours.
Thank you, Your Worship. There is very little, if any, overnight parking there. It is primarily people either launching their boats and going out for the day or going using the water park.
So, Mayor, could I have a follow up too, please?
Certainly, Councillor Cooper.
And just in that, I think what Brad has said about the permanent residents versus the visitors. I pay for my parking at my marina. I pay for my parking in Aurora. So if I'm somewhere where I have to pay for parking, so I'm just a bit confused as to why we would have a free ride for permanent residents in certain places and not others. It doesn't sell very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wojcik, please.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, I think we have a petri dish sitting across the street there, which is all the proof we need, and I'm absolutely in favor of option number 2. All we have to do is look at the facts that have been in front of us for the last 5 years.
Councillor Hazelton.
I'd like to ditto Councillor Cooper's comments. Everybody pays for parking, certainly in Honey Harbor. Nobody gets a free ride. The only place you can park for free is, short term at the park landing. I do support the free parking at Port Severn Park with passes for residents as we've had in the past, but I can't imagine why we would be introducing any free ride for anybody because parking is not free. So and neither is boat launching. So I solve number 2 the same way. I vote for 3 and 6.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, I'm with option 3 as well, but I'm also going to comment on parking, generally speaking, and the requirement or the thought that parking lots need to be paved. And I mention that because the marina I use has no paved parking. You go in and you find a place to park. And if it's there, it's there. And we pay for it. And so I don't think I agree with the concept of having to pave and mark parking spots. If you're parked there, you're paying for the parking. So that's one thing I think you might want to consider in that context. The other issue with paving is runoff. And if you're not paved, the ground is absorbing, one, a lot of water that we tend to get on occasions these days, and two, anything that's coming off the cars without water, not to mention anything that's leaking out of the cars in the first place. So I'm not too sure I'm convinced that paving is necessary. Obviously, we have to really look at that a little more closely, but I don't know that it is. And again, yeah, I'm with option 3. We pay for parking, let's pay for parking.
Thank you. Councillor Predko.
Thank you. And I think similar to the kind of comments I've made before, I think some of these inland lakes don't have options for residents, and parking has been available there historically. Having said that, we do pay for parking ourselves at the marinas, and I think most people also do look at paying for the parking at the marina, but the parking lots are an area that some people have traditionally used. And I think that they view that as part of what has been provided by the township and has been included in their portion of the property tax bill. And I realize that's not available throughout the township on the base side, but in our areas that has been traditionally part of what's been available to them. In terms of boat launches, I don't know how we would police and monitor and charge for boat launch. You wouldn't have somebody standing there with a gate. You'd have Brad standing there going like this. I think from a practicality perspective, boat launch is a bit more difficult. But then I think that does mean that you pay for parking to park your trailer when you've launched. So it's kind of a combination of 1 in 3 or whatever it was. 1 in, I'm not wearing my glasses now. 1 in paying for a boat launch or parking your boat trailer.
Thank you.
Quick follow-up, please, Mayor.
Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, I'm all for this free parking as long as we put parking lots in Honey Harbor for the family members of all the people that go out to their places and they bring kids up and they have to pay for 3 or 4 spots for their family, which they do. So we'll just forget about that and create a parking area in Honey Harbor so that they have a free ride too. Be what's good for the goose. Thank you.
Brad had to be there at 7. So
If I don't make it, it's not the end of the
well,
world.
I think we're going to try. I'm gearing on letting Brad go by 5:30, but we'll see whether we succeed at that. No, I'm not in favor of that whatsoever. Please don't misinterpret. I find myself in I'll call it 2.5, and people may groan because I'm trying to go down the road. But to me, I think that if we're going to let me call it upgrade our parking lots, pave them, paint some lines on them, and all that sort of stuff, I think yes, people should be paying for their parking. But I think what we could consider is issuing a pass at a reasonable discount. If you're charging, and I'm just making up these numbers because I have no idea what the right numbers are, but if you're charging $20 a day to park, and you do all the math, and you figure, that's 600 days a month. Maybe you'll issue a pass per property at $250 a month or something like that. Again, I'm just making up numbers so that everybody gets a spot at a discount price. But if they have visitors, they have guests, they have more people using it, then they got to pay the full price. I also think it makes sense that, you know, we limit those passes to 2/3 or 3/4 the volume of that parking lot. And I'm going to say the same thing with the boat launch. Instead of trying to control the gates and the people launching their boats, I think we should charge parking for the boat trailer. I find it very frustrating when people are allowed to park a truck and trailer and they only have to pay one fee where they're taking 2 spots. And I think it's appropriate for the trailer to have to pay the same expense as the car or truck that's towing it because it takes the same space. Mr. Sokash.
If I may respond to that, it sounds like there was a omission in my report. That is what we currently do at Port Severn Park. It's, I think, $20 a day for a car, $40 for a car trailer. I have presumed that that would be carried forward, but I presume that without letting any of you know what our current practice is.
Well, no, I didn't realize that, and thank you very much for that correction. Councilor Graziano.
Thank you, Worship. And I would agree. I think 2.5 is kind of a good middle ground whereby perhaps our constituents could receive a discount relative to what full cost would be. On the inland lakes side, you know, we have constituents who purchase slips at our marinas as well as have a dedicated spot, but they get kicked out at season's end, and they are left to use the public parking / launch areas to ride out the remainder of that season until they close. And so from that perspective, I just don't want them to see that or feel that they're having to pay for parking twice in a season, once with the marina owner and then once with the township. The other thing with respect to comments on paid parking in and around the Honey Harbor area, I think the difference is, and we have to pay close attention to the difference, is that in Honey Harbor, those are privately run businesses. They're not the municipality. But if I were to go into Honey Harbor and park at the library, I'm assuming that I wouldn't have to pay with my parking pass. And that's something that perhaps I could be wrong, but Albert's here, and not get a ticket. So we do allow for unpaid parking in our township. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Predko.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe we should do a survey of parking rates across the lakes, the inland lakes and in Honey Harbor. I think my marina charges approximately $100 for the season for a parking spot. So paying $200 for the municipal lot would be a premium, and I don't think we would have very many takers. So we would have to we would have to look at this carefully. I know, I'm just saying that, you know, when we're talking about how much money the value would be to our residents, it's not going to be a particularly high amount. I think it depends on where you live in the township for what the value of parking is and how much it costs at the marinas to be comparable.
Councilor Hazelton.
Well, it's interesting you asked that question because you're way out of line. $310 for the first car in Honey Harbor, $160 for the second car, and $150 for future cars.
But
for a season.
I understand.
And that's not winter, that's summer only. So it's not cheap. And one of the things that I think it's important for everybody to understand is, you know, my marina may be a little pricey, it's Nautilus, but boat club's probably in the same ballpark. Village might be a little bit cheaper. But I mean, if you're paying $100 for a season, it's a windfall. Charging $200 is reasonable for one car. If I pay for a trailer, $230, one trailer. If I have 2 trailers, it's double that. So that's Honey Harbor pricing. And maybe the whole township doesn't need to be that way, but you're getting a free ride in these other areas if that's what you're paying. And for us to think or consider for 1 second that we're going to give more free parking to these other areas, you need to understand the optics here. Because everybody in Honey Harbor is paying big rates. Anyways.
Yeah, $300 a season? Isn't that what you pay a day in Toronto?
Yes.
So it's a relative bargain.
It's a relative bargain.
Councillor
If I you respond, I'm not trying to question. I'm just saying the economics within the township are very different. So I can understand the concern that there could be, you know, free or low cost parking in other parts of the township. But that is, I guess, market conditions. I don't know how the township can act as an equalizer. It may be something that we should just leave it as number one, where it's the status quo and we don't touch the parking lots. We leave them with some gravel and move on. But I don't think we can implement a system that's going to be equitable throughout the inland lakes and through Honey Harbor and the Georgian Bay areas.
I think this is where it would be interesting for Mr. Sokash to come back with let me call it an estimate, A, of how much it's going to cost to pave a lot and set up a machine to collect money, and 2, how many spots will be on that lot. And then we start doing the math and saying, well, if we collected $200 per spot, how many years would it take us to pay off our investment? I mean, are we talking a decade or are we talking a century? I mean, obviously just ballparking, but I think that would be an important thing to consider.
Cost benefit, thank you.
Sorry?
Cost benefit, thank you.
You're welcome. Are you thinking, or should I be going on to somebody else?
No, I'm thinking there's two different concepts that have been brought up that I'm thinking about. The first one, CEO Mariotti actually brought up, which was not potentially paving parking lots. I couldn't find any gravel parking lots. I looked online, I looked for explanations. I couldn't find anything that really supported it. So that if we wanted to go that way, which is way cheaper and makes the cost benefit a lot more reasonable, I would respectfully suggest we pick a couple lots and try it for a year and see what kind of headaches we get into. What was the other one? Alternatively, looking at doing all of the lots. Oh, sorry, if we just did a couple of lots, we'd also get a better idea, I think, of how many passes are being sold and how many one-time or irregular visitors we're receiving, and give us a better handle on the costs. But I'm starting to like the 2.5 idea. Not that that matters, but.
Thank you. Councillor Graziano.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question, and perhaps we don't have the exact figures, but rough figures would be fine. What does the Port 7 Park pull in annually?
Between 20 and 25,000.
Annually.
Annually.
And is there a cost to us? So is that net profit or is that gross minus the costs?
It might be $2,000 tops.
Net profit.
Sorry, costs.
Okay.
The machine cost about $10,000. I don't know, 8 years ago.
Right.
And it's costing us about, the top would be $2,000 a year.
So we net roughly around 25 grand per year, 20 grand per year. Okay. Second question is, I don't think anyone has asked what staff feels, and I know that this is directed at us because you want to know what our opinions are, but I'm curious to know what your opinions are. We haven't seen any recommendations, and I'd like to better understand, perhaps, Brad, where you feel. I think I heard you say that you'd like a pilot project. I would agree with you on that. CEO Mariotti, would you echo that, or do you feeling that a pilot project would be the better option here?
I think it's a great way to start looking at this, without needing to pave a parking lot. I think there are systems out there now, correct me if I'm wrong, that you don't even need a machine anymore, that you can actually pay with just an app. So the upfront cost is minimal. We could do the same thing that we do here in Port Seven, is that if you're a resident, you hang your tag, and if you're if you don't have your tag, then we expect you to go on the app and pay. So I think that's a real simple first step at implementing something, but I'll defer to Brad.
I just, if I may, before the apps can be set up in such a way that it recognizes license plates that belong to residents and at a different rate than license plates that do not belong to residents because the resident has registered their license plate.
I don't know if they do that, but here for example, if you're a ratepayer, you don't pay. Period. You put your so there's no rate differential.
But here at this lot, it's not like people are using it for parking long term.
I don't believe so. I've not seen cars parked here for days on end.
So, because our unit here is over 8 years old and not up with the times people can't pay with their debit card and that kind of stuff, Albert has been assigned the process of reviewing that parking meter and starting to look at new ones. And Albert has quite a bit of information on the different types that are out there, so it makes it easier. We don't have the cost of the permits printing for hanging in the mirrors because it can all be done electronically, and when they walk up with their cell phone, it reads, they can go point at any license plate and that will instantly tell them whether that's a resident who's registered their vehicles, and if it is, it's move on, and if it's not, then it's a ticket if they can't display a parking. So I believe it's not even a ticket. You already know whether they've paid.
So just to elaborate, I was meaning to speak to Brad, and I only stayed because I knew what the topic was, and I just wanted to see what direction is my staff and myself are directly affected. We saw a very big increase in the Port Severn enforcement this year. 2/3 of our tickets actually came from Port Severn and actually enforcing the no permits. So as you might recognize that, elaborating or making that program bigger than Port Severn, it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of training to make sure that the staff are diligently, because that only works in hand with enforcement. The other part of it is that the program that the chief has been talking about is a system that was used in Vaughan and then also used in Georgina, where my experience is, in doing all the enforcement in parking lots. We had the luxury of doing parking lots that had gate arms, and then waiting for the expired permits to deal with. You're elaborating on a lot of your parking lots aren't paved. What if I told you that you didn't need to have those parking lots paved? Literally, the machines would be there. You would put in your license plates there specifically, and it would print off a ticket. And obviously, anybody that's parked outside of those parking spots, we would deal with it enforcement-wise. And you wouldn't have to have lineage because of the fact that the machine would be able to have their specific license plate. So I can't take my permit and I don't stay for the day, but I pay for the day and then pass it off to Brad, who just comes in after me, and I drive away, but Brad's going to park for free. So there is that technology out there. I can get numbers for you. I can help Brad out with this stuff because I do have a very big background in it. And I can elaborate on that stuff as we need for your information, but the technology is there. It is absolutely there for you and what you guys are describing. And we wouldn't have to waste money on maintaining the parking lots. We wouldn't have to make them hard surfaces. We wouldn't have to do lineage, which is it's just literally on the machine and the apps that we would have. I could even tell you that if we had Honeybee Festival, that my officers could go there, and when they go to punch in the license plate on that date, whether it's a funeral, a wedding, staff would automatically get a warning, and it would tell them to contact this number first for this contact, and it would be up to the officer to punch through that to issue the ticket. But the capability of allowing them to tell them that there's an event, wedding, funeral, and negate having misunderstandings on delivering tickets. But there's that option for you.
Yeah, I mean, more and more places are having that various app. Now it's a pain in the butt because you have so many different apps in your phone. If you're park at different places. But it would certainly save us a heck of a lot of setup money, and certainly if we don't have to pay, that would be a great savings. Mr. Sokach, did you have an additional comment, or?
I did. If we were looking at doing a pilot project, we have two areas of concern. Oh, geez, Miners Bay and 6 Mile, I believe at Volux specifically. So if that's where the resolution was heading, I think that's what we would like to have identified as pilot spots.
And the biggest issue with those locations were that people were leaving their trailers, literally there for the entire summer and not being accounted for, not being, actually, and I had to deal with it on such a regular basis that I still have 3 there to remove. But then it's also removing those assets and then putting them where. So there is accountability there that we could use. And like, again, we would literally put up the machines, have the app, and it would be run efficiently. And then, like, again, hand in hand with enforcement.
Sounds good. Councillor Cooper.
So I was making the remark about cost benefit, and cost benefit, by the way, includes building the facility. Port Severn, if I recall, costs us something like $5 or $6 million. So to earn $25,000 a year is peanuts. So remember what it costs to build some of these things. Secondly, with respect to gravel in parking areas, my marina recently added some gravel where I park now. They have really basically had dirt. So I've gone from dirt to gravel. I'm really excited. I still pay my $200 a year, but I've moved up to gravel. So why do we need putting in pavement? I don't get it, and I don't see the cost benefit. Thank you.
Councillor Graziano.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate my previous concerns with regards to if we only do Volux, then we're going to have mass migration north to Crooked Bay. Now, maybe Crooked Bay could be a good pilot for a non-paved surface to see whether or not we could still charge non-resident visitors within that parking space, but without having to undergo the drastic grade changes that it requires, as well as the actual paving of that. But it would essentially mitigate those that would have historically parked at Volux from going north to one extra exit and parking there. So just my thoughts.
I think I'm really warming up to the gravel parking lots with some form of app or issuing a ticket with a license number or something like that, because putting those systems in is going to cost a heck of a lot less than paving the lot.
Actually, through your worship, and to answer Councillor Cooper's question, these units are all solar powered now. So they are not needed for any internal or any hard wiring. They're literally a concrete pad. You put a couple bullards around it, and it's a solar panel. So the batteries are lithium now, so they'll last even through the winter. So the problem we had in Georgina is that we would actually close off the machines and allow the parking to happen in the winter. Well, the parking never stopped. So we had problems with people ice fishing, parking there. And the reason was because the batteries were too old and were not to date, so they weren't capable to function in the wintertime. The batteries nowadays, lithium, so they work nonstop.
No. Go ahead.
I don't have anything to add. Thank you. I didn't mean to say that. I'm so sorry, Jen. I apologize on microphone and camera.
He told me on microphone and camera I can't speak.
Is there any input from your table?
There is from me. I think where we're heading is a trial. I think with one of these systems using an app. One area where, and possibly with passes that can be purchased for people in the areas, but I think what different councillors have suggested the pass is dedicated to one parking lot as opposed to being across the whole township or usable across the township. Did I understand that correctly? That complicates things a little bit, but not a lot.
I don't know if anybody mentioned that.
I think you did, Your Worship.
Did I?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, okay, my experience is in Barrie, where I have a couple apps on my phone, and that app, I registered my car, my license plate. In certain parking lots, I can therefore park for free. In certain spots, I still have to pay, but I do it through the app. And I find the app quite flexible that way. Ms. Schneier, I'm going to give you a turn.
Is it okay? I just want to clarify that it would be very helpful if we could get into an app situation so that those parking lots that don't allow overnight parking would never be able to sell an overnight parking pass. So we had traditionally used the hanging tags, and we have not ordered them for 2024 yet because of this conversation. Because if a resident has a pass and they are allowed to park overnight at Miners Bay or at any other outlier parking lot, then the inference would be that they're allowed to park at Port Severn Park for overnight parking as well. So if this is the will of council to go forward with the app process, it would make it a lot easier for staff to be able to identify what is and is not allowed at the various parking spots.
I think it's very important that if we went ahead with an app, we'd have to be very clear as to which parking lots it applies, which ones have to be paid or not paid, or which ones are overnight or not overnight.
Well, you can pass that responsibility on to the app provider too.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be something that, we would have to monitor. Unless you have something else to say, Brad.
No, I'm laughing because what you said was something I'd written down to mention at some point. Thank you, Ms. Schneier.
All right. Councillor Predko, you want to jump in again?
Yeah, I was just going to make one comment that there are different kinds of stabilizers for gravel parking lots, and share some of the information that I have. We use one on our hill at our cottage. It's quite steep and it's gravel, and it's all stabilized with these panels that have little cells that you put the gravel into. They have them in parking lots in Toronto, and you can paint lines on them. So possibly it's a solution, but I don't know how well they'd hold up to the wear and tear that we would have in our jurisdiction.
All right. Have we discussed this enough? What do you need from us?
I think we need direction to bring back a report to the next council meeting with the recommendations as discussed.
Okay. But I don't know do you want those recommendations spelled out or just?
I think I'm okay if they're not spelled out.
Because your spelling out here that I have in front of me doesn't quite do it.
If it was earlier in the day, I'd ask for them to be spelled out.
No. Okay, moved by Councillor Hazel and seconded by Councillor Graziano. Be it resolved, the staff bring back a report to council regarding, in response to the discussion, the parking discussion held today. Is that okay, Madam Clerk? I'm going to say all those in favor. And that is carried. And I would like to note, Mr. Socash, that it's not quite 5:30.
Thank you to everybody, especially Ms. Schneier.
We don't need any of this. Okay. So I'm a little bit surprised to say that we can now adjourn COW and we don't carry any of it over until tomorrow. Well done, council. Moved by Councillor Predko, seconded by, it won't be Councillor Bocek, so I'm going to say seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved, the Committee of the Whole does now adjourn at 5:28 p.m. to reconvene on December 12th, 2023, or at the call of the chair. All those in favor? And we are out.